Zayden Moore's hands tightened around the camera as his 6-year-old son darted ahead of him, laughing as he chased a butterfly. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across the grass of Riverside Park, and for once, Zayden wasn't thinking about overdue bills or the fact that his car barely made it here. "Slow down, Sawyer," he called out, slinging the camera strap over his shoulder as he jogged after the little boy. Sawyer turned, grinning with the gap-toothed smile that always managed to knock the air out of Zayden's chest. "But I almost got it, Daddy." Zayden chuckled, crouching beside him and brushing his wild curls back. "You catch that butterfly, and we're celebrating with ice cream. $1 menu, deal?" "Deal," Sawyer shouted, holding out his tiny pinky. Zayden linked it with his own, and for a moment, it felt like nothing in the world could touch them. Until he heard a voice behind him say, "Excuse me?" He turned and saw her wearing a soft cream sweater and jeans, standing under the oak tree with a small, fluffy dog on a leash. She held her phone awkwardly, like she didn't know what to do with it. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her tone warm but unsure. "You seem like you know your way around a camera. Would you mind taking a few photos of me and my dog? I've been trying for 10 minutes and I keep cutting off my head." Zayden glanced at Sawyer, who was already chasing another butterfly. "Yeah, of course. I can take a few. I'm a photographer, actually." Her face lit up. "Really? That's perfect. I'm Nylah Bennett." He took her phone, adjusted the settings instinctively, and said, "Zayden, that's Sawyer." He motioned toward his son. Nylah tucked her hair behind her ear and knelt beside the little dog. "Nice to meet you both." Zayden crouched, snapped a few test shots, then stepped to the side. "Look at your pup like he just told you a secret." Nylah laughed and did exactly that. The moment was real, unposed, and soft. He clicked. "Got it." She stood, brushing grass from her knees, and walked back over. "Those were fast." Zayden handed her the phone. "You don't need 1,000 shots when the moment's right." She stared at the pictures. "These are actually wow. You're good." Zayden shrugged one shoulder. "Thanks. Just trying to keep the lights on." She looked up, eyebrows raised. "You do this full time?" "Used to. Before Sawyer's mom left, I had a studio. Now I take portraits when I can, weddings on the weekends, and try to be the world's most embarrassing dad the rest of the time." Nylah's smile faltered just a little. "That's a lot. But Sawyer looks happy." Zayden turned to watch his son twirl in the grass. "He's my world." She hesitated, then asked, "Would you mind taking a few more? With my camera this time?" "I'll pay you." Zayden opened his mouth to say no, that it wasn't necessary, but his bank account flashed through his mind. Groceries weren't going to buy themselves. "Sure," he said. "I've got my gear in the car." They ended up near the small lake, where the sun was starting to dip. Nylah posed naturally, laughing as her dog jumped into the frame. Zayden couldn't help noticing how she didn't fake her smiles. Every laugh looked like it came from somewhere deep. After about 20 minutes, she sat on the bench beside him while he flipped through the images on his camera. "These are amazing," she said. "They'll look even better edited. I can send them over tonight. How much do I owe you?" He hesitated. "Honestly, whatever you think is fair." She pulled out her wallet and handed him a crisp $100 bill. Zayden blinked. "This is too much." "It's not," she said, voice calm. "You're talented. You deserve it." He stared at her. "You're serious?" "Completely. And, if you're free tomorrow, I was thinking of doing some shots at the flower market. I'm helping my friend with a project for her boutique." "Yeah, I'm free," he said before he could even think. "Same time." She smiled. "Same time." Sawyer ran up then, breathless. "Daddy, I saw a turtle." Zayden scooped him up. "Time to go, buddy." Nylah waved at Sawyer. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Butterfly Hunter." Sawyer waved back. "Bye, lady." As Zayden carried his son toward the car, he glanced over his shoulder. Nylah was still standing there, watching them. And for a second, her expression wasn't just friendly. It was something else. Something softer. Curious. Almost. Longing. But Zayden didn't see it. He was too busy trying to figure out how to stretch that $100 until Friday. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that Nylah Bennett had a net worth well over $10 million, a penthouse on Fifth, and a last name that belonged to one of the oldest investment families in Manhattan. And for the first time in years, she didn't care about any of that. Because something about the way Zayden looked at his son, like the kid hung the stars in the sky, made her heart ache in the best way. She was already falling, and he had no idea. The scent of fresh blooms hit Zayden before he even turned the corner. Tulips spilled out of wooden crates, daisies danced in the breeze, and the air buzzed with the chatter of vendors and customers. He guided Sawyer's hand gently as they stepped into the Saturday morning chaos of the flower market. Nylah was already there, crouched beside a table of ranunculus, chatting with a gray-haired florist who seemed to know her well. She wore a slate blue wrap coat over a linen blouse, and her dog was perched obediently beside her, leash wound tight around her wrist. The moment she spotted Zayden and Sawyer, her face brightened not with politeness, but with something warmer. She stood, brushing her hands on her coat. "Good morning," she said, voice a little louder over the buzz of the market. "Hope you didn't get lost in the maze of peonies." Zayden lifted his camera bag and nudged Sawyer forward. "We made it. Barely survived a rogue croissant at the bakery stand, but we're standing." Nylah laughed. "Sawyer, did you defeat it?" He nodded solemnly. "I ate the head." Zayden gave her an amused glance. "That's how he handles most problems." She crouched to Sawyer's level, her expression careful but playful. "I might need you on my team then. I have a lot of croissants in my life." Sawyer leaned in. "I work for snacks." Zayden cleared his throat. "Okay, mercenary. Let's not negotiate contracts in front of the client." Nylah stood again, tucking a strand of hair beneath her sunglasses. "Ready to shoot?" "Always." They started near a patch of wild roses, the light filtering through the overhead canopy in fractured gold. Nylah posed easily, but this time she asked him questions between shots, about his lenses, about the kind of photography he liked, about the most memorable shoot he'd ever done. "I once did a backyard wedding during a thunderstorm," he said, adjusting his focus. "The couple didn't want to cancel. I ended up half under a tarp, trying to keep my camera dry while they danced in the rain." She tilted her head. "That sounds kind of magical." It was. Until the best man tripped over the extension cord and knocked out the speakers. She laughed, a real laugh that made two passers-by glance over. They moved through the market slowly, pausing as Nylah picked up handfuls of lavender and sunflowers, pairing them against her coat and asking what would photograph better. Zayden noticed how people recognized her vendors nodding, some greeting her by name, but she never acted like she was above them. She listened, asked questions, handed out compliments like candy. He didn't say it, but it struck him that she didn't move through the world like someone who'd always had it easy. After an hour, they took a break on a bench near the fountain, Sawyer perched between them with a sticky chin from the honey stick Nylah had bought him. Zayden unscrewed his water bottle and offered it to his son. "Here, rinse off the sugar tsunami." Nylah leaned back, watching the water ripple nearby. "Do you ever shoot cityscapes?" "Sometimes," Zayden said. "But they don't pay the bills like people do." She tapped her fingers on the armrest. "Have you ever thought about doing gallery work? You have an eye not just for beauty, but for story." He glanced at her. "That's flattering, but I don't think galleries are lining up for a guy who edits photos between bedtime stories." "You never know," she said. "Some of the most successful artists started with nothing but a camera and a stubborn streak." Zayden looked down at Sawyer, who was trying to feed a pigeon a piece of mint candy. "I've got the stubborn part." She hesitated. "I'm planning an exhibit for a nonprofit I work with. It's focused on capturing the human experience, real lives, real joy, real struggle. Would you ever consider contributing?" He blinked. "You'd want me in that?" "I would," she said simply. "You have something people need to see." Zayden didn't answer right away. His first instinct was to say no to protect himself from the idea that maybe he was good enough. But something about the way she said it, like it wasn't a charity offer or a favor, made him pause. "I'd have to think about it," he said honestly. "Of course," she said. "No pressure." Sawyer suddenly tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, I have to pee." Zayden stood quickly. "Sorry, bathroom break." Back in 5. He lifted his son and started toward the public restrooms at the edge of the market. As he walked, he glanced back once, expecting to see Nylah distracted by her dog or her phone. But she was watching him again, quiet, focused, almost like she was trying to memorize something. That night, while Sawyer slept curled under a blanket with a stuffed giraffe, Zayden sat at his laptop. He uploaded the new shots and clicked through them slowly. The light, the angles, the way she looked when she wasn't posing, she wasn't just photogenic. She was luminous. He opened a new folder, labeled it Flower Market, and paused before saving. Then, without letting himself overthink it, he added another word. Nylah. Zayden adjusted the strap of his camera bag as he stepped into the sunlit atrium of the building Nylah had told him about. Sawyer's hand was in his tiny backpack bouncing against his back with each step. The lobby smelled faintly of eucalyptus and marble polish, and the concierge gave them a polite nod as they passed, though his eyes lingered a beat too long on Zayden's scuffed boots. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Zayden asked, glancing down at Sawyer. "I think so," Nylah's voice called from the top of the curved staircase. She wore a tailored black blouse tucked into high-waisted trousers, her hair swept back, not a single strand out of place. At her side was a woman in her 50s, rail-thin, in a sharply cut blazer and with a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Zayden's stomach tightened. This was clearly not just another shoot at the park. "I didn't realize this was going to be so formal," he said once they reached her. "I should have warned you," Nylah said, her tone apologetic. "This is the venue for the exhibit. I wanted you to see the space before you decided anything." The woman beside her didn't offer a smile. Instead, she gave Zayden a look that managed to be both assessing and dismissive. "Nylah," she said crisply, "this is the photographer you mentioned?" "Yes," Nylah replied without hesitation. "Zayden Moore. And this is his son, Sawyer." The woman offered a nod that barely qualified as polite. "Interesting choice." Before Zayden could respond, Sawyer tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can I go draw in the corner?" Zayden crouched and pulled a sketch pad and crayons from his bag. "Stay where I can see you, okay?" Once Sawyer was settled near the window, Zayden stood and faced them again. "I don't think I caught your name," he said to the woman. "Marjorie Langston," she replied. "I manage the Bennett Foundation's cultural outreach programs." Zayden glanced at Nylah. "Foundation?" "I work with nonprofit initiatives," she said carefully. "This exhibit is part of that." He nodded slowly, piecing it together. "So this isn't just a gallery showing?" "No," Marjorie replied before Nylah could speak. "It's a 6-week installation with rotating press coverage, charity sponsors, and a launch gala attended by donors and media." Zayden's hands tightened slightly. "I thought this was about real people, real stories." "It is," Nylah said, her voice softer. "That's why I wanted you involved." Marjorie's gaze narrowed. "We typically feature established artists, ones with gallery representation or press portfolios." Zayden let the words land without flinching. "I don't have either of those." "No," Marjorie said. "You don't." Nylah stepped forward, her tone firm. "He doesn't need them." Marjorie gave her a look sharp enough to cut glass. "We'll see what the board says." With that, she turned and walked briskly toward the exit, heels echoing against the marble. Zayden exhaled slowly. "Well, that went well." "I didn't know she'd be here," Nylah said, rubbing her temple. "She's protective of anything tied to the foundation, which I'm guessing is part of your family's work." She hesitated. "Yes." He studied her. "So that's why the market vendors knew your name, and why you handed me $100 without blinking." "I didn't lie to you," she said. "I just didn't bring it up." He crossed his arms. "Why not?" "Because I didn't want it to change how you looked at me." "It kinda does, Nylah." Her expression flickered. "I wanted to know what it felt like to meet someone who didn't care about the last name on my bank statement." Zayden glanced towards Sawyer, who was humming to himself as he colored. "So what happens now?" "You go back to your world, and I go back to mine." "I don't want that," she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, full of things neither of them wanted to say too soon. "I don't know what this is," he said finally. "But I know I'm not just some project for you to pull into the spotlight." "You're not," she said, stepping closer. "I see the way you look at the world, Zayden, through your lens and without it. And I think people deserve to see it too." He looked at her, really looked, and realized her eyes weren't just full of conviction. They were full of something else. Something that scared him more than any rich girl's pity. Hope. Later that evening, after Sawyer had fallen asleep in the twin bed beside his own, Zayden sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the edited shots from the market. He clicked through them slowly, pausing on one where Nylah was mid-laugh, a sunflower gripped in her hand, her eyes shining. He opened a blank email, attached the file, and typed one sentence before hitting send. "If I do this, I do it my way." Then he shut the laptop and lay back in the dark, wondering if the world he'd spent years surviving was finally about to collide with one he never thought he'd touch. The night of the exhibit arrived like a wave Zayden hadn't seen coming. The gallery was transformed, its pristine walls covered in large-scale prints of moments he'd captured with quiet reverence. A flower vendor wiping his brow under the morning sun, a father spinning his daughter in the middle of an empty city street. A wrinkled woman holding a bouquet with a tenderness that made the image ache. They were slices of truth, and for the first time in years, Zayden felt like he hadn't just documented the world, he'd left his fingerprint on it. Sawyer was at his side, dressed in a little navy vest and buttoned-down shirt, his curls combed down as much as they'd allow. Nylah had arranged for one of the gallery's assistants to keep an eye on him during the formal hours, complete with snacks and a cozy corner where he could color or nap if the night stretched too long. Zayden stood near the back wall, watching the crowd drift from frame to frame. Some whispered, some pointed. One woman dabbed at her eye after staring at a photo of a man kneeling in the rain with a soaked bouquet. "You did this," Nylah said behind him. He turned to find her in a deep burgundy silk gown, her hair swept into a low chignon that made her look like a portrait herself. She wasn't wearing diamonds, wasn't draped in anything excessive. She didn't need to be. She was still the woman who crouched in the dirt to snap a shot of her dog with a daisy crown. "I don't know what I expected," Zayden said, his voice quiet. "But it wasn't this. You earned it." He looked around. "They don't know who I am. They don't need to," she said. "They see the work. They feel it. That's the point." He studied her. "When did you decide I was worth believing in?" Her eyes held his. "The second you made my dog look like a philosopher in a sweater." He laughed, the tension breaking slightly. She stepped closer. "You haven't asked what happens after tonight. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." "I'm ready now," she said. "This exhibit raised over $200,000. The foundation wants to fund a permanent community photography program. You'd run it. Teach. Mentor." He blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a future," she said. "One with stability, with meaning, and with me, if you want that." He stared at her, his chest tight. "You're serious." "I've never been more." He looked at Sawyer, who was now showing one of the guests his drawing, a lopsided heart with stick figures holding hands beneath it. "I can't give you penthouses or private jets," Zayden said, voice thick. "I can barely keep up with laundry most weeks." "I don't want any of that," she said. "I want the man who sings along to old cartoons while making peanut butter sandwiches. I want the man who sees things others miss and captures them like they matter because they do." His throat worked. "You're not going to wake up one day and decide I'm not enough?" She shook her head. "No. I've had more than enough of not being truly seen. You saw me, Zayden, before you knew my name. Before anything else." He didn't speak. He just took her face in his hands and kissed her slow, certain, and full of everything he hadn't known how to say. Sawyer's voice broke the moment. "Daddy, you're kissing the fancy lady." They pulled apart, laughing. Zayden crouched and opened his arms as Sawyer ran into them. "She's not just fancy," he whispered. "She's ours." 2 weeks later, Zayden stood in the doorway of a new studio space, sunlight pouring in through tall windows, shelves lined with donated cameras, walls already covered in student work. Sawyer sat on a beanbag in the corner, building a tower out of donated film canisters. Nylah leaned against the counter, barefoot, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. He walked over and kissed the top of her head. "This is all real," he said. "Yes," she replied, smiling. "And it's just the beginning." He looked out at the space as space. Their space. Then down at the woman who had seen him, chosen him, and changed his life without ever trying to change him. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, Zayden Moore didn't feel like a man surviving. He felt like one who had finally come home. 3 months later, Zayden stood at the edge of a rooftop garden, his tie slightly loosened, the city skyline blazing in gold behind him. The air was warm with the hum of late spring, filled with the scent of lemon blossoms and jasmine vines wrapped around trellises. The sun hovered low, casting long shadows across the elegant spread of white tablecloths and flickering lanterns. The fundraiser was in full swing. It was the first event hosted by the Photography Mentorship Program, his program, and the turnout had doubled expectations. Donors, artists, and community organizers mingled beside a display of student photographs, each one a vivid window into unfiltered life. A band played soft jazz in the background, and glasses clinked under string lights. Across the terrace, Nylah moved through the crowd wearing a soft green dress that caught the light each time she turned. She was laughing at something an elderly woman said, her hand resting on the woman's arm as though she hadn't just been introduced. That was what always caught him off guard, not her elegance, but how rooted she was. She never floated above anything. She stepped right into it, without hesitation. Sawyer sat on a bench nearby with 2 older kids from the after-school program, carefully arranging toy dinosaurs on a tiny jungle mat one of the volunteers had brought. A woman from the Foundation sat close enough to keep an eye on them, but far enough to give them space. Zayden had made sure of that before he let himself relax. "Never thought I'd see you in a suit," came Elijah's voice from behind him. Zayden turned and grinned. His brother had flown in from Seattle to surprise him, and was currently holding a plate piled with mini quiches and skewers like it was a trophy. "Never thought you'd show up at a non-profit event that didn't serve beer." "I came for the free food," Elijah said, then nudged him. "And to see you standing in front of a crowd that's actually listening to you." Zayden exhaled. "It still feels like I'm borrowing someone else's life." Elijah studied him. "Feels like you finally stopped borrowing your own." He clapped him on the shoulder and moved off toward the buffet. Zayden watched him go, a lump rising unexpectedly in his throat. He hadn't told Elijah everything the nights he'd questioned his place in Nyla's world, the quiet fears about whether any of it would last, but somehow his brother always knew what to say, even if he pretended not to. The music shifted, and a soft chime rang from the stage. Marjorie strode to the microphone, her tone warm and clipped as always. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said. "We're here to celebrate the success of a program that has exceeded every expectation. And that success would not have been possible without the man who brought it to life." Zayden felt Nyla's hand slide into his. "Don't make a run for it," she whispered. "I wasn't," he murmured. "I just didn't expect to be called out." Marjorie's gaze found him. "Zayden Moore, would you join me?" He stepped forward slowly, heart pounding, the crowd parting as he walked to the stage. He took the mic with a nod, then looked out over the sea of faces, some familiar, some not. All waiting. All here because of something he built. "When Nylah first asked me to take photos for a market project," he began, "I thought I was doing her a favor. I didn't know it would lead to this. I didn't know I'd find purpose or a community, or that I'd get to teach kids who remind me of myself at their age, kids who just need someone to believe in the way they see the world." He looked at Nylah. "And I didn't know I'd find love in the middle of it." There was a quiet murmur through the crowd. Nyla's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "I don't come from much," he said, "but I know what it means to care about something enough to fight for it. This program, these kids, this life, it's worth fighting for. And I'll never stop." Applause broke out, loud and genuine. Zayden handed the mic back and stepped down, his hand finding Nyla's again. "You didn't run," she said softly. "I had a reason to stay." She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. "Come with me." She led him to the far edge of the rooftop, away from the lights and crowds, where the city stretched out like a promise. There was a small table waiting, surrounded by candles and tall glasses of lemonade, Sawyer's favorite. Zayden raised a brow. "What is this?" "A celebration," she said. "For once, I wanted to do something for you." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You already have. You gave me a life I never thought I'd have. You gave Sawyer a future. You gave him that yourself," she said. "I just helped light the path." He kissed her then, slow and deep, with the kind of certainty that came from knowing that nothing about this was fragile anymore. They weren't borrowing time. They'd built it. Sawyer ran over a moment later with a crayon crown on his head and declared himself king of the rooftop. Zayden lifted him, spun him once, and planted a kiss on his cheek that made the boy giggle. "King Sawyer commands a dance," he announced. Zayden looked at Nylah. "Your move, queen." She laughed and curtsied, then took Sawyer's hand in one and Zayden's in the other. Together, the three of them swayed under the stars, the city humming below, the candles flickering like tiny suns around them. They didn't need more than that. They had each other, and that was everything.